Buried treasure. The very words seem to conjure up images of swashbuckling pirates, Spanish doubloons, and roll-top chests buried deep in the earth. Every corner of the globe can lay claim to its share of treasure legends. And even if they are nothing more than legends, the prospect of instant wealth and fame can add fuel to the fire of the imagination and turn average, everyday human beings into wide-eyed and sometimes irrational treasure hunters. Although young when compared with other nations of the world, the United States, in its 240 years of history, can lay claim to more than a few legends of lost or hidden treasure. Many of them, in fact, date to a time before there even was a United States. Such is the case in the hills of eastern Kentucky, where one such tale of treasure and wealth has inspired and tempted experts and amateurs alike for more than 260 years. In 1760, the area that is now eastern Kentucky was still a vast, unexplored wilderness, dotted with towering mountains, raging rivers, and dense forests. Few colonists, save perhaps George Washington, had crossed into its uninviting confines. For generations, the region had been occupied by the Shawnee tribe, who often found themselves in conflict with the nearby Cherokee, to whom the territory had recently been ceded but not occupied. History is somewhat vague on the exact date, but around the year 1750, a group of French fur traders and trappers were traversing the region. According to published accounts, the group was set upon by a band of Cherokee. Some escaped, some were killed, and one, a youth by the name of George Mundy, was captured. Ironically, before Mundy could be transported away, the Cherokee were set upon by a group of Shawnee, and Mundy was captured again. Over a period of years, Mundy grew and was eventually accepted as a member of the tribe. The trust reportedly extended to the point that he was made privy to one of the Shawnee's best-kept secrets, namely the locations of rich silver deposits secluded deep within the rocky wilderness. Mundy is said to have worked these mines alongside the Shawnee for an unknown length of time. Just how Mundy eventually managed his escape from the Shawnee is unclear, but at least one account states that he was captured by members of General Edward Braddock's army during their ill-fated attempt to capture Fort Duquesne. Other accounts state that Mundy simply bided his time and made a run for it when conditions were optimal. Whatever his means, Mundy is said to have eventually made his way to Alexandria, Virginia. Here, he lived as a virtual pauper in the streets, surviving mostly on handouts. It was in Alexandria that Mundy made the acquaintance of a man named Johnathan Swift. Swift's own background, indeed his very existence, is also open to much debate. Some say he was born in Alexandria and spent much of his early life at sea. Other accounts state that he was born in England and that his time spent at sea was spent in privateering for the crown, at a time when privateering had been banned. Swift, it is said, may also have accompanied General Edward Braddock on his infamous march from Cumberland into oblivion. Swift took pity on Mundy after hearing of his hardships. In return for his kindness, Mundy is said to have relayed his knowledge of the Shawnee silver mines to Swift, even offering to guide him right to them. Again, several versions of what unfolded over the next few years have been reported over the centuries, and obviously some of the details may have become clouded by the fog of time. According to several of the most oft-repeated versions of Swift's Odyssey, the affair unfolded generally along these lines. As a businessman, Swift's curiosity was piqued by Mundy's revelation. Swift organized a small party of associates and, in 1760, launched an expedition deep into what was, at the time, still the backwoods of the Virginia colony. Kentucky would not come into being for another 33 years. Mundy, who during his time with the Shawnee had learned much of their ways, blazed the trail into what was essentially unexplored jungle. After taking some time to get his bearings, Mundy was able to locate several key landmarks, which eventually enabled him to lead Swift and his men to one of the abandoned mines. It was just as he had described it. The rocky outcroppings were rich with silver. Having planned this first expedition as a seek-and-discover mission, Swift and his men made no effort to extract the silver, but merely made note of its location in their travels. That is not to say that they did not have big plans in mind. The following year, 1761, Swift organized a much larger party, this time with the intention of mining and smelting the silver and returning it to Alexandria. Taking a slightly different route, reportedly through present-day Pittsburgh, Mundy again led Swift and his men into the Virginia wilderness. This time, Mundy is said to have taken them to another, far richer vein of silver, somewhat to the north of the previous year's find. Over the next 9 years, Swift and his parties are said to have made several annual treks into the backwoods. During this time, they reportedly extracted, smelted, and coined hundreds of thousands of dollars worth of silver. In October of 1769, Swift and his men left the mine for the final time. Swift himself is said to have had even bigger plans in mind. He wanted to travel to London to see if he could interest investors and mining experts to enable the full extent of the find to be exploited. Here again, accounts differ as to what delayed Swift's return. Some state that Swift was shanghaied and impressed into service in the British Navy. Another account states that Swift made it to London, but was overheard voicing strong support for the American colonies and a deep loathing of the British Crown. His loose tongue is said to have earned him 15+ years in an English prison. During this time, the American Revolution erupted, and by 1782, the American colonies had become the United States of America. Swift again surfaced in 1790, this time at Bean Station in what is now the state of Tennessee. Between 1770 and 1790, Swift's eyesight had significantly deteriorated. Despite his handicap, he is said to have made one or more attempts to retrace his steps and locate the mines. However, 20 years of growth, coupled with Swift's failing sight, doomed the venture almost from the outset. During his years he was working his mine, Swift is said to have kept a detailed journal of his comings and goings, including directions to the mine. Apparently realizing that he would never again be able to cast what was left of his eyes upon the mine, Swift is said to have entrusted his journal either to a Mrs. Renfro of Bean Station or to a frontiersman who saved him from dying of exposure during his final attempt to penetrate the wilderness. Sometime between 1791 and 1800, Johnathan Swift died. And it is here that Swift's direct role in the legend ends. It was, however, far from the end of the legend itself. In fact, it could easily be described as a mere overture to what would come. For once Swift the man was supposedly gone from the scene, the power of folklore and myth quickly stepped in and took over. The Swift legend, like many others, is one that is extremely long on rumor and hearsay, and decidedly short on documented fact. Over the next 230 years, scores of historians, geologists, and treasure hunters alike would try their hand at unraveling Johnathan Swift's tightly spun web. The first known mention of Johnathan Swift, or at least someone with that name, came to light in 1788, when famed cartographer John Filson made a claim for a tract of land which reportedly contained a mine or mines once, quote, worked by a man named Swift, end quote. Filson would go on to complete the first highly detailed map of the Kentucky region. And then he, too, vanished from history. Filson's claim to the tract of land in eastern Kentucky was apparently a recorded fact, as it also found its way into the 1792 edition of Gilbert Imlay's Topographical Description of the Western Territory of North America. Around this time, an enigmatic man, whose name was Johnathan or John Swift, sold off a large tract of land in eastern Kentucky, land which reportedly included one or more of the Swift mines of legend. Recently, the original deed of this transaction was tracked down and examined by author Joe Nickell. He confirmed the 1793 transaction and the name Swift. However, the deed in question soon posed a problem for those who believed in the legend. The deed proved that there was a John Swift in eastern Kentucky in 1793. However, it also proved that he was there in 1808 as well, as the property was later reacquired and redeeded in his name. Moreover, according to Nickell, this Johnathan Swift was also known to have lived until the year 1824. If he was the John Swift of legend, and the birth date given in his journal was accurate, he would have somehow reached the ripe old age of 112. As if to ensure that future historians and conspiracy theorists would not be left disappointed, this John Swift was well known to be a Freemason and a member of the local lodge. When he died in 1824, his burial was carried out with full Masonic honors. Some, including Nickell, have recently speculated that this entire affair concerning the tract of land in question was nothing more than an elaborate and apparently very successful 18th century real estate scam. The first fully documented printed appearance of the Swift legend was put into type in 1823, when Judge John Haywood published his famous work, The Civil and Political History of Tennessee. Here, Haywood makes a brief but telling reference to Swift, his mine, and, most importantly, his reported journal. Haywood wrote, "One Swift came to East Tennessee in 1790 and 1791, and was at Bean's Station on his way to a part of the country near which these furnaces are. He had with him a journal of his former transactions, by which it appeared that in 1761, 1762, and 1763, and afterward in 1767, he, 2 Frenchmen, and some few others had a furnace somewhere about the Redburg Fork of the Kentucky River, which runs toward the Cumberland River and mountain, northeast of the mountain of Clear Creek. He and his associates made silver in large quantities at the last-mentioned furnaces." Haywood's reputation and veracity are virtually above reproach. As such, most historians credit this as the true genesis of the Swift legend. Johnathan Swift and his silver mines quickly became a staple of Kentucky's embryonic folklore. In 1847, a much longer and more detailed version of Swift's alleged journal appeared in Richard Collins' Historical Sketches of Kentucky. It is from this printed work that most modern versions of the journal are reproduced. It is worth noting here that even Collins states that he is utilizing a copy of Swift's purported journal as his written source. In fact, of all the printed copies of Swift's journal circulating today, None are reported to be copies made from the original, and the original itself, if it ever existed, has long since vanished. Assuming for the moment that Collins' reproduction is accurate, then readers for the first time were provided with a fairly detailed account of Swift's mines, their location, and how to reach them. In addition to the Collins history, many newspapers around the country also took to publishing either excerpts or nearly full versions of the journal, such as this example from the Hazel Green Herald in 1894. Needless to say, an influx of prospectors and opportunists into eastern Kentucky soon followed, and the flow has never really stopped. Again and again, the legend of the treasure and the tales of those who sought it proved enticing fodder for journalists and historians alike. Over the years, many claimed to have found the mines. Many claimed they knew its precise location, and many would spend and lose their lives in search of it. If Johnathan Swift's mines are not merely a legend, where were they? And could they still exist today? A number of resources have been utilized over the years in an attempt to locate Swift's mines. His infamous journal provides tantalizing clues which often stop just short of detailing a precise path to the mine or mines. The most commonly reprinted segments read as follows. We cut our horses on the river called Red. Monday went down the river 2 or 3 miles west and found the Indian trail. We went down a flight of Indian stair-steps at the top of the cliff and crossed to the other side. We climbed up and went 200 yards on the second ledge and found the opening to the mines. 1 mile southeast of the mine is a remarkable rock, and right below where the branch forks we smelted the ore. 5 rods up the creek where it bends to the south, there is a large fallen rock, a gap in the cliff. East of there lets you out of the cliff country. Not far from the mine is a rock that looks like a turtle. If you strike the creek below the furnace, keep in the creek searching diligently for a big rock house on the left-hand side. About 100 yards from the smaller rock house, the furnace in the creek makes a bend to the south, and there is a fallen rock in the creek near the bend. If you discover the furnace, go to the middle mine. Go up over a southeast course until you come to a remarkable hanging rock very high up with a gap in between it and a very large mountain. Within 100 yards, you will find a line of rocks that the mine is in. The latitude of the mine is 37 and 56 degrees north. In turn, John Filson's 1788 land claim gives the following location. About 60 or 70 miles northeasterly from Martin's Cabins in Powell Valley, to include a silver mine which was improved about 17 years ago by a certain man named Swift at said mine. The land to be in a square and the lines to run at the cardinal points of the compass, including the mine in the center as near as may be. This is Lincoln County, number 10117, issued May 17, 1788, and filed in the Land Office at Richmond, Virginia. John Filson's name has since become inexorably linked with the Swift legend. Curiously, in his 1784 book concerning what is now the state of Kentucky, Filson himself wrote, "Iron ore and lead are found in abundance, but we do not hear of any silver or gold mines as yet discovered." These selections cover a great deal of territory in what is today Kentucky. The most oft-mentioned location for the Swift mines is in Wolfe County, about 60 miles southeast of Lexington. Here, several of the supposed landmarks cited in Swift's journal are reported to have been located. Chief among them, several of the famous natural bridges which span the creeks and rivers in the area are thought to have been the one or ones to which Swift made reference. Flights of so-called Indian steps, Natural rock formations which closely resemble man-made stair steps have also been located. In 1906, Howard Flanagan, a writer for Appleton's magazine, not only found but photographed what he feels are the exact same steps trod by Swift and his men in the 1760s. This same 1906 edition of Appleton's includes a number of photos which purportedly depict other landmarks Swift is supposed to have noted in his journal. However, many historians remain convinced that neither Swift nor his alleged silver mines ever existed, or, conversely, that Swift himself, if he existed, found no mine, but instead used the legend as a cover for an elaborate counterfeiting operation. They feel that Swift would illegally obtain silver by raiding ships at sea, and then cart the prizes deep into the wilderness, where they were smelted and formed into counterfeit English sovereigns. On the other hand, believers and skeptics alike have tended to dismiss this theory, stating that if Swift or anyone desired cover for such an operation, they could easily have found it far closer to the shore, that they need not have ventured as far inland as present-day Kentucky. Whether he existed or not, Johnathan Swift, his mines, and his legend continue to live on in more ways than one. Today, visitors to Wolfe County, Kentucky can relax and camp at the Johnathan Swift Historic Campsite. While no veins of silver may be visible, treasure of another, more wholesome kind can be found in the natural beauty and rugged majesty of the surrounding hills and forests. Opportunities for hiking, climbing, and canoeing are never far away. As far as we know, Johnathan Swift's silver mines have never been found. And given the enduring nature of the legend and the enticing thrill of the search, perhaps it is just as well if it stays that way. Today, men still venture into the hills of Kentucky in search of Swift's lost mines, and one cannot help but wonder why. Virtually all of the territory in question is comprised of either private or federal land, and any silver which might be discovered would not legally become the property of the finder. But perhaps we're missing the point. After all, it was William Shakespeare who said, "It is the play which is the thing." Maybe, for those who seek John Swift's elusive silver mines, it is actually the search which is the thing.